It's my pleasure to welcome all of you here today and to welcome Representative Jim McGovern and Senator Michael Moore to talk about regulations on AI considered by the federal government and the state government. This talk is the second in our series of talks on AI and is part of the Shrewsbury Public Library Foundation's Distinguished Speaker Series. Today is Pie Day, and we have pies for everyone at the back. Thanks to Tabletop Pies for their generous donation. You're welcome to grab one on your way out. Today is also Einstein's birthday, and Einstein once said, "I fear the day technology will surpass our human interaction. The world will have a generation of idiots." I think Einstein would have approved of the variety of programs offered at this library. As we are having a discussion on AI here, across the hall, there are teens participating in a writing workshop. Now I'd like to invite the co-chair of our foundation, Mo Boisvert, to introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Priya. Priya is such a compassionate, caring director, so that everyone who comes through the doors at the library feels welcomed, and it is such a inviting environment for people to have the kind of dialogue we hope to have tonight, and we all appreciate the great job that she does here. Also, I just want to say that there are several members from the foundation here. My co-chair, Nancy Gilbert, is up here in the front. I just wanted to introduce her. And I did want to say that I find it really interesting. I'm not really a big tech person myself, and I find it interesting that when I'm on the computer now, it wants me to prove that I'm a human. So I don't know where we're going to go with this in the long run, but it's going to be a challenge for sure. We did last month have Dr. Fabrizio Murai from WPI, who is here tonight, who did an excellent job giving us a history of AI and the status of AI as it exists today. With the upsides in healthcare, as we I think are hearing, the upsides in healthcare are enormous. The hottest job in America, according to the New York Times, is the director of healthcare in hospitals. So people are looking to fill that role, and it's going to be an important upside to AI. On the downside, we've all heard of people's voices being mimicked, and you can't tell that it isn't really that person, or images of people in compromised positions that really it wasn't really that person. So there's some downsides to AI, and the whole question is, how are we going to find a way to kind of manage all of this and put some guardrails on it? And I think our legislators are going to have a real challenge to understand the science as well as to help set a reasonable approach to this whole new technology. Next month, we're going to have Dr. Yvonne Mezikowski speak, and she's going to talk a little bit about ethics, but it's going to be from a global perspective. She just finished publishing a report for NATO on AI and cybersecurity, the problems between countries, and how disinformation and misinformation is now being used as a weapon between countries. And she's going to be here next month to talk about her work. Although when I called her and asked her if she'd come, she said, "Well, there's a lot of things I can't talk about because it's secret." So I hope that she said she'll be able to talk about everything that's in her book. We will have her book available at the library very shortly. So that's a little bit of the backdrop. With that as the backdrop, we wanted this month to bring in leaders in the legislative field to try to help us kind of think about, where is this going legislatively? What is Congress going to do to begin to set AI? What kind of procedures are they going to use to get there? And also the state legislature, how are they going to respond? We're very fortunate tonight to have two leaders of our Commonwealth who believe what Ben Franklin believes. Ben Franklin started the first lending library It was a huge step forward in democracy, really, because it created an opportunity for the sharing of information in a way that didn't exist before. Libraries back in the 1800s were personal libraries. They weren't lended out. And he got a group together to start a lending library. And he believed very strongly that the most important thing we do is to do good for others and to support the common good. And that's what libraries do. He felt that libraries were a critical role in that democratic process. And we have two leaders here tonight who really exemplify the common good, and they have done a lot for the common good. Our Congressman Jim McGovern, which most of you know, his signature common good work has been in the area of malnutrition and food insecurity. He has just done enormous work, not only in this country, but outside of this country as well, to try to make sure that everybody has enough food to eat. And he's been a leader in that field, and Jim, we're all really proud of the work that you've done in that area. And we have Mike Moore, who is actually the chair of the AI committee in the legislature here in Massachusetts. And Mike, his signature, I think, common good work has been in education. Mike's chaired the education committee. He's done a lot of work in education, fostering opportunities for young people across the board. And I know the Shrewsbury Public Schools have benefited from the work that Mike's done as well. So with those two comments on each of them to introduce them, I'm going to ask Jim to come up first, and we're going to have a few minutes of background, and Mike's going to do the same thing, and then really we want to open it up to questions. We're really looking to have this become a dialogue, an opportunity for people to really get into the weeds a little bit from your perspective with them. So with that introduction, Jim, pleasure.
Well, first of all, let me thank everyone for having me here tonight. Let me thank Mo, who's been a longtime friend, and I appreciate all he does for this community and for our state. I want to thank Director Priya Ranthnam for all the work you do here at the library. This is an incredible library, and the community here should be very proud of it. And to be here with my friend, State Senator Mike Moore, I thank him for all of his work on artificial intelligence and heading up the caucus. I think for most members of Congress, we're still trying to learn what the impacts of artificial intelligence are. We can't even figure out what regular intelligence is. So, you know, I was at an event last week, and all anybody wanted to talk about was why Barbie didn't win the Oscar. So it's kind of refreshing to be here. And as Mo mentioned, you heard from Dr. Murray from WPI about the history of AI and its current applications, which makes you a hell of a lot more knowledgeable on the subject than most of us in Washington. But what I want to do tonight is to give you a sense of what legislation is before Congress to deal with AI, both the challenges and the opportunities, because we have to deal with it. AI is everywhere, and things are moving very, very, very quickly. Customer support bots, movie recommendations on Netflix. My wife Lisa uses Siri write all of her messages. I mean, sometimes I think she's talking to me, and I have a whole conversation with her without knowing. But AI has really exploded beyond that, and now it can generate new ideas, make pictures, spread misinformation, and hack into security systems. And with the launch of ChatGPT, it's now being used to write speeches, legislation, and maybe one day even court decisions. As you learned last week, hospitals use AI to decide treatment courses and diagnose diseases early. And some cars use AI to drive down the street that we cross every day. We are training our computers to think like us. It's exciting, and it's also scary, because we don't always think nice things. And look, I don't want to scare people. The AI boom isn't the first time a major technological revolution posed an existential threat. Some of us here are old enough to remember Y2K, where we worried that computers couldn't account past 1999. Many people thought the internet itself would ruin our economy. But go even further back. I mean, electric lights destroyed the whale oil industry. Cars made horse-drawn carriages obsolete. Splitting the atom brought us into the space age and brought us deadly nuclear meltdowns and devastating nuclear bombs. So just like all the revolutions that came before it, AI can be used for good or it can be used for bad. Our job as a society is to address the harms now so that it ends up being more good than bad. And let me be very clear, the harms are happening right now. Social media algorithms are being used to manipulate public opinion and spread disinformation. Facial recognition technology is being used to violate privacy and undermine civil rights. And authoritarian governments in countries around the world are using technology to crush democratic movements. Even here in our own country, lies about a stolen election spread on social media continue to erode trust in our democracy. But here's the good news. We have the tools to regulate these things. The Industrial Revolution burned fossil fuels and polluted our air. So what do? We passed the Clean Air Act to guarantee fresher air for all. And President Biden just passed the single largest bill to fight climate change ever passed. Workplaces used to be full of dangerous machines and children running them. So what do? We created OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We passed age minimums to work. We made sure that every worker was paid a minimum wage and cracked down on employers putting their workers in harm's way. Regulations like these were put in place because people came together to fight for the protections that they knew these industries needed. Now, as AI becomes more and more common, we ought to be empowering experts and policymakers to work together to protect everyday people. You know, the last time I spoke at length about AI, I was giving the commencement address to the class of 2023 at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. I impressed upon the graduates that we needed their voices in this conversation. I said to them, technology is just a tool, a means to an end. It must serve us and not the other way around. It should be used to advance our highest ideals, not the lowest common denominator. So my message to them was simple. Don't switch off your conscience. And I stand by my message. When we have these kinds of public conversations like we're having tonight, I turn back to basic democratic principles, finding truth, bringing every voice to the table, and working together for a better future. And my point is that, yeah, we need philosophers and historians and economists and civil rights lawyers working on AI. We also need parents and students and librarians and sports coaches and artists and construction workers. We all have to be part of this conversation. And here's why. Because AI reflects the biases that exist in the real world. You know, we all have probably heard of ChatGPT. ChatGPT is what's called a large language model. They're called the LLMs for short. They're trained on billions of pieces of data that could include text from any book ever written, any article ever published, any tweet ever twote, you name it, right? There's a lot of great books and articles out there, but there are also a lot of ones that are racist or sexist or transphobic or you name it. A lot of things these AI models are reading and learning from. And the danger of these LLMs is that they recreate the biases of their programmers and data from which they're trained. So all the racist misinformation floating around online gets fed into LLMs, and the machines learn to spit that junk back out to us and to its interface. So what do we need? We need people in the loop, people who can help filter out bad information. And obviously, bad information is subjective. Too many of what my colleagues think, too many of my colleagues think that all information, they think that all my information is bad because it's me. You know, maybe they want AI to rely on alternative facts. But my point is this: AI must be created, used, and regulated by as many kinds of people as possible. That's how this should work in a democratic society. Currently, one major piece of AI legislation seeks to do just that. It's called the Create AI Act. It would establish a nationwide framework to democratize both the development and the use of AI technology. As it stands, only the wealthiest companies have the resources to produce the expensive research needed to understand AI technology. And I personally think it's better to get this technology out to the public rather than expecting profit-oriented giants like Google, Microsoft, and Meta to do the right thing. Other pieces of legislation seek to publicly label AI-generated content, prevent the generation of inappropriate deepfake photos, and require disclosure from spam callers that they're using AI to impersonate people's voices. I just shared with Mo something that somebody sent to me that basically had former President Obama, wishing this guy who he's never met in the world all the best wishes and saying some inappropriate things, but it sounds exactly like President Obama. And so how would somebody differentiate between what's real and what's not? There's a lot of great ideas that I support and will be pushing, but let's face it, we have a lot more work to do in this space. AI technology, whether we like it or not, is here to stay. And my challenge for you is the same challenge I have for the WPI students. You can't switch off your conscience. And until and unless Congress passes some of these bills, bad companies will keep doing bad things with AI. And I need you to be critical consumers of media, now more than ever. It's always been our job to question the source. Now I need you to consider that the source is not actually human. In the same way fake news is everywhere, fake content is abound. So if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And that's what's sad is that too many of my colleagues want to let AI run rampant. They have this aversion to any regulation at all. I think they would have voted against kids working in coal mines if they could. So we need to demand more, not only from AI, but from the politicians who don't think that there's a problem here. And before I get to your questions, let me just address one more thing that might be on your minds, because this just happened. So by now, you may have heard that the House of Representatives advanced a bill that forces TikTok's owners to sell the app or face a ban in the United States. And I want you to know that I voted no on that bill, and there's four big reasons why I voted no. First, I'm concerned that targeting one specific company will infringe the freedom of speech of over 170 million Americans that use TikTok. Second, this bill was rushed. I mean, this is a big deal, right? And so you would think that we would go about it in a way that was deliberative, that was thoughtful. I mean, the sponsors and the House leadership did not give any members or staff nearly enough time to consider the wide sweeping ramifications of this bill. They gave us 4 days from a closed-door committee hearing to a full vote in front of the House, and they brought it before the House under a limited process that only allowed 40 minutes for debate and no amendments. I mean, I would like to think that, no matter what your position is on this, that you would want a process in which questions were being asked and answered, and that there were no unintended consequences. I mean, this has implications that are pretty significant. I went to a closed-door classified briefing to try to hear what the urgency was and what the concerns were. I heard what the concerns were, but quite frankly was terribly unimpressed with the presentation. And not even be able to answer the question of why does this have to be done in 5 days? Why can't we do more open hearings on this? Why can't we bring in people who utilize TikTok? Why don't we have a more intelligent conversation? That didn't happen. But the third reason was a ban on TikTok would also seriously harm businesses and creators in our district that use TikTok every day. This is not just something that our kids use or that we use for pleasure. We have businesses that are based on TikTok, and we need to figure out how we deal with that. And finally, and this point is a bit more complicated for me to make, but this bill does not protect Americans' data privacy, and it doesn't combat the misinformation that proliferates on social media. Look at Russia interfered with the U.S. elections in 2016. Facebook admitted to promoting fake news on its platform. YouTube has been exposed for pushing young people into far-right extremism. And to single out TikTok as the sole bad actor in this space doesn't make any sense to me, because there are a lot of bad actors in this space. And we need a more comprehensive approach. We need to get this right. And to get it right means we need to be thoughtful about how we approach this. Sadly, our data is unguarded. Data brokers sell our information to the highest bidder. It is true that the Chinese government can compel Chinese companies to disclose data of their users whenever they ask. But domestic companies do this too. Google can store customer location data that can be used to prosecute women who have obtained abortions. When the intelligence community, again, briefed members of Congress on TikTok's danger, I wasn't convinced as it relates to all the other platforms we have. So look, if we're going to do something like this, and we have to address the problems, the misinformation, some of the bad influences on our young people. We have to have these serious conversations. But for heaven's sake, let's do this. Let's do this right. There's nothing worse than rushing a bill, and after it passes, it gets signed to law, and go, oh, well, I didn't intend that to happen. I didn't intend this to happen. I didn't even think about that. Well, you know what? Let's do it right the first time. You know, I'd much rather see comprehensive data privacy legislation, like the one that Senator Warren has introduced, called the Upholding Protections for Health and Online Locations Data, the Uphold Act. I mean, her bill would prevent abuse of personal health and location data. Or a comprehensive AI bill like Senator Cory Booker's Algorithmic Accountability Act that interrogates the disproportionate impacts AI technology has on communities of color and directs the FTC to enforce laws against discriminatory AI systems. So, as always, I mean, I'm going to continue to try to learn as much as I can about this pressing issue. These laws and these regulations, they may take a little bit of time. They need more feedback and they need more careful consideration. But if we all do our homework, and again, everybody, is heard in this, I'm confident of our ability to get it right. So I'm optimistic. I mean, if history has taught me anything, it's that when we work together, we accomplish extraordinary things. And so together, let's make sure smart, safe, common sense AI regulations are the law of the land. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you. Great job. And they got a tough job down in D.C. these days, as we all see in the news. So let's just set the stage here. I know we're talking AI, and AI and cyber kind of cross paths here. 8 years ago, I think it was, the legislature created its first cybersecurity committee, which the Senate President I was able to get appointed to. So we were just dealing with cybersecurity and trying to learn, get prepared on, or proactive on what we had to address. Now, AI wasn't even discussed back then. So we all, different state entities come in, private sector. So we learned a little bit about the cybersecurity and how every industry had their own protocols. So you couldn't develop a cybersecurity standards for finance that could be used for healthcare or could be used for manufacturing. So we did a report, recommended recommended legislation from that. And we also recommended the permanent establishment of a joint committee on IT, internet, and cybersecurity, which, as Mo stated, I'm currently the chairman of in the Senate. I also want to go back and say, for someone who's retired, I think I see Mo or his name out there more often than when he was working. So I don't know how that worked out. But he's a really great advocate on behalf of Shrewsbury and so many causes. So fast forward now, beginning of this legislative session, we refiled the cybersecurity, we call it the Cybersecurity Control Board. and AI. Because now AI was, at the beginning of the year, when I got this committee, even then, artificial intelligence was just starting to roll. It was just starting to come out with all the issues that were developing. So since then, we've adapted the legislation, and the package has a cybersecurity control board, which would be tasked with establishing minimum standards, and it also relates to artificial intelligence. Now, the minimum standards, one thing that we were worrying about with cybersecurity is our economy here in Massachusetts is based on what? Healthcare, technology, life sciences, and artificial intelligence and the internet, that's all part of it. So we're looking at trying ways that, in this, to make sure that we balance security with also make sure we're not going to impact research and jobs in the economy. So when we created this, the recommendation for this cybersecurity control board, we have the state fusion at the Commonwealth Fusion Center. That's made up of state police officers, and there's also federal officers that work together. We have the Secretary of Public Safety, we have the Secretary of Economic Development, we have the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Resources, and we have and there's some others on it, but we have experts that we're calling for appointments by the governor of experts in the industry of finance, healthcare, manufacturing, and other entities that the governor would appoint. This way, so when these committees get together, they would sit and they would discuss what the basic standards, security standards should be for cyber, what their protocols, if they're going to be taking personal data, that they have to have a minimum. We're not saying the platinum level security, we're just saying establish minimum security levels. Now, I'm going to give you an example. Did anyone see about a week and a half ago, the data breach that United Healthcare had in the paper? Did anyone see we had a Ways and Means hearing Monday, and I was asking the Secretary of Health and Human Services what the effects of that was. Does anyone see the paper that followed after that? So this breach affected hospitals across the country and in Massachusetts. The financial impact, which is still being felt to the healthcare industry, and this came from the Hospital Association, it's a $24 million hit on the healthcare industry. We've had, in other states, breaches dealing with healthcare, where ambulance services were actually shut down. So we're talking money now. Now we're talking lives. So in some ways, when we're talking 24 million, that's a lot of money. But is that more important than that one ambulance that couldn't respond to someone's house in a life-saving situation? Or if you're trying to go to the emergency room, and because that maybe there was a breach, which, as Congressman McGovern talked about with AI is only going to increase the capacity or enhance the capacity of the bad actors to be able to breach your information. So also with this legislation that we have filed is the creation of an artificial intelligence control board. And this would survey the uses of all AI. So when we first proposed this, we actually have a Secretariat of Information Technology and Security. When we first got this committee this year, we had a meeting with them asking, okay, what does state government use for AI? What do you think the answer is? We don't know. So they are in the process, and we actually have this in the legislation, to document what type of AI state agencies use. Now, some of these state agencies may have been using it for years. And I'm going to give you an example. The Registry of Motor Vehicles. Facial recognition is a form of AI. We've been using that in the registry to make sure people aren't getting duplicate identifications or false identifications for years. Now, and look, it's a tool, and AI learns. But there are racial biases in that. People of color, it's harder for it to distinguish people of color than it is a white person. So in AI, we've got to deal with these issues. We're also looking at protecting training data. used to create AI platforms, and and put some control on industry, what they can, or how fast it can advance. And actually, this is another section of the bill, which I kind of call my Terminator piece. If someone had said to me 20 years ago that I would ever file legislation this, I probably would have laughed. But I had Boston Dynamics approach me. They make the robots that look like dogs that police use to go in for an explosive, to respond to a possible explosive device. They want to prohibit weapons on robots. Well, right now it's not too late, but they don't have any on there. But, you know, there are applications that you could use these robots for. Air quality. You have a fire department that's responding to a fire. Well, you send the robot in with an air monitoring device. This also includes drones. You fly a drone into a certain area. It has some sort of monitoring device for an environmental situation. So these are all forms of AI that we're trying to address. And this one is specifically, you know, it's kind of, you know, you watch a movie and you think it's futuristic, but applications could be there. There's another piece of legislation that just came out of committee today in the Senate Ways and Means. It passed the House, and we're voting on it next week. It's revenge porn. So it uses AI, and what it does, it could take someone's face and put it on someone else. It can show some sort of inappropriate act, and it's being utilized. So what happened with Joe Biden, the president, in New Hampshire, where they just did the voice? Well, this can be done with someone's image. So we're trying to pass regulation which would prohibit that. Also, part of this legislation is what's called coercive control for domestic violence. 10 other states have it. We're trying to. It's a piece of legislation I filed that would bring Massachusetts in line with 10 other states. That we all know domestic violence or sexual violence. It's a physical act. This would be utilizing. You could charge someone with coercive control or domestic violence if they were using these types of images to control a victim, so that you don't file charges or you don't leave, or that some sort of control over the victim. So we're doing that next week. Also, you gotta remember too, like when we talk about the biases, computers or the technology, the data it uses in its memory or how it develops its opinion, it's only as good as what's put in. So if you have someone who has racial biases or other type of biases, and that's the material or the knowledge that's being inputted into that artificial intelligence device, that's what it's got to base its decisions on. So it's kind of like, you know how on social media, the algorithms, if you're constantly looking at certain news articles, the algorithm on Facebook or whether it's TikTok, they will continue to send you articles based on that. So that's kind of how the artificial intelligence would work. It's based on what the material it uses for knowledge. Also in the state level, what we have, the governor just established an artificial intelligence task force. So myself and the House chair for the Joint Committee, we're both sitting on that task force. We had our first meeting last week, but we have representatives from government, we have healthcare, we have finance, we have education, schools. So there's representatives from WPI is on this task force. We have MIT. So we are actually trying to look at all the different policy areas on how AI can benefit us, from workforce to also what we have to watch out for with the application of AI. The Congressman also talked about geolocation. We have several data privacy bills that are sitting in the committee right now. So data privacy, it's the laws that it's the regulation of laws that would limit what private companies could keep. The problem with that is, so there's different processes on this. There's what's called data minimization. That's a theory that the less data the company is allowed to keep, the less you have to worry about getting circulated or someone seeing. There's the geolocation data. We've got one Senator Cream who's got a bill that would protect or prohibit AI or any sort of geolocation data on anyone utilizing a woman's healthcare clinic. Then we also have exemption level data. So we have data brokers that the Congressman talked about, trying to establish some regulations on, actually limitations on data brokers, on what they can sell and get access to. Then there's also called identity exemptions. So right now, based on federal law, banks, there's a finance exemption. So it exempts them from certain restrictions. But what some states are dealing with that have passed laws on this, the entity level exemption only applies to, it's supposed to only apply to the data that they need for their industry. But some states have passed blanket exemptions so that these certain companies that are covered under the federal law get an entire exemption that they can contain, they can save or have any information they want. So these are things that we're looking at on the data privacy level. But my counter to that is, I've been a strong advocate for trying to increase the cybersecurity type of regulation or work. Because no matter, even with data minimization, if you don't protect that data, what good is it? You can limit the amount of data that they have, but if we haven't provided any sort of regulation or regulatory guidance on companies on what they need to do to protect against breaches, no matter what they have, all your information is subject to a breach. The European Union, just yesterday, their parliament, the world's first major set of regulatory ground rules to govern artificial intelligence. It covers high-risk areas such as medical devices, critical infrastructure, water, electrical works. Some AI uses are banned because they deem it pose to unacceptable risk, like social scoring systems that govern how people behave, and some types of predictive policing and emotional recognition systems in schools and workplaces. Other bans include use of police scanning faces, use of AI-powered biometric identification systems, and kidnapping and terrorism. Then we get the deep fake. The deep fake also applies to what we're talking about with the phone call and the revenge porn type of the false images, the digital visualization images that were created. Then they have some extra security protections dealing OpenAI, the GPT-4. So Europe is actually well ahead of us in cybersecurity and now also artificial intelligence. But I will say this, I do give the Haley Driscoll administration the credit for, at least right now, this AI task force. We are one of the first states in the country to actually establish one of these to try to look at all the policy areas that we can address. And I am hopeful that my discussions with Ways and Means, especially after this United Healthcare breach, that we might be able to get some parts of the cybersecurity control legislation passed, that we can start looking at some sort of minimum security standards for Massachusetts. But there's so many implications that AI and cybersecurity affect every one of us. Tell me what part of your life these applications don't affect. And right now, we don't have any regulations on them. And what's even more scarier is, has anyone followed the quantum technology? My first time I touched the computer, I was working in the Attorney General's office. I was like 28 years old, and when you went into that room, opened that door, There was that, remember those big banks of computers and all that? I never touched the computer. I had to learn how to do DOS. From what I was told, if you look at what we have right now, you could say this is the DOS compared to where quantum technology is going to take us. What how scary that is. And this is one of the issues too when we're looking at regulations. Why we're looking at regulations rather than statute. So statute is something that the legislature votes on and passes a law. A regulation and a commission can evolve as the technology evolves. So all they need to do is have a hearing, people come in and testify, then they can issue new regulations, or they can pass emergency regulations. That's also something else we're doing in this legislation. We're updating the Massachusetts Civil Defense Law. Right now, if we had a cybersecurity incident that shut down any part of our critical infrastructure, the governor does not have the authority to implement a state of emergency. So we are looking at changing the civil defense law to add a cyber attack or cyber type incident to that authority. And I think I'm getting a look, so, okay. Thank you, and more than happy to answer any questions for what I can help with.
He's on the committee of jurisdiction, he knows everything. So.
I just wonder about I think the regulations are great, but in some ways I feel like the horse is already out of the barn. And how do you enforce these regulations? Who's gonna take that on?
So,
For example, whether it be bad actors or somebody using revenge porn, if that's already out there, that the person that's been damaged by it has already been damaged, so,
if I can just, the Congressman talked about TikTok.
yeah.
I totally agree with him on the TikTok, because we've had legislation before the state that we've looked at. We shouldn't be banning a company. It's not the company, it's the platform, the technology. All right, so if you shut down TikTok today, some other company by some other name opens up and does the same practice. So in this legislation I'm talking about, we also give the authority to this control board to try to look at the bad actors or the technology of the platform rather than the specific company. On the legislation we have, that's why we have in there, we mandate the notification. If you're a victim of a breach, you have to immediately notify the State Fusion Center, which the quicker you notify them, the quicker they can try to track down through whatever expert process that they have, they can try to track down the person who did it.
So this must involve local police departments and state police, or all of these levels?
We've had local police departments be the victim of ransomware. We've had city halls be the victim of ransomware.
No, I mean in terms of the regulation part of it.
Well, no, we don't deal with the local police, and that's nothing, just because of resource issue. We also have a cyber trust fund, a cyber center trust agency, that they also get involved. It was created underneath Governor Baker through an executive order, so we're trying to codify that. And there's actually the state, just down at Bridgewater State University, they have, if you walked into this room, the computer system that they have in there, that they're actually having college students will be handling the cybersecurity for the municipalities. So it'll be no cost to municipalities, and as these students learn, they're going to have professors there teaching them how to detect and better protect the technology. So that we are still trying to develop more ways to do it, but we report quicker, we mandate quicker reporting, and that would be for the artificial intelligence and cyber breaches. And again, that's why we have the industry experts there, because we don't know. The last thing you want is myself or maybe the congressman, or so you don't want us saying this is what you got to do. We mandate the experts be there so that they can tell us how you do these things.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead, Will.
So Jim, you had mentioned that there's some legislation looking at tagging AI information, so that if you're producing something by AI, you have to identify it
Right.
somehow. And to Dib's point, I think the question then becomes, well, if somebody's not tagging it and they're putting out bad stuff, I guess the question is how the regulation gonna deal with, laws to address that specific issue? Are they gonna be federal or state? Or is that even an approach that is seriously being looked at?
I mean, this is my own opinion. I mean, and I'm really grateful that the state is moving ahead. But I really do think you can't have 50 different sets of rules in 50 different states, right? I mean, you need federal intervention here. There may be some things that states want to go further on, they can do on their own, but there really needs to be federal legislation. And that's why, again, as we move forward on this stuff, I mean, really, the administration should be doing town halls everywhere, and getting people's advice, because what I worry about is that the advice that they're relying on is really the advice of the big companies. These guys are in it for money, right? And I get it, making money is not a bad thing, but, I want to make sure that what we're doing is not just regulating these platforms in a way that benefits them, but actually that protects our kids, that helps people identify when misinformation is being put out there. So I do think there needs to be federal intervention here at some point, and I think, and at the same time, we can learn from what the states are proposing. And look, and if a platform is not doing what they're supposed to do, on this TikTok legislation, they would just require all the places where the app appears to shut it down. And so, I'm not an expert on all the different things that you can do, but if we want to, there are ways that we can police this area better, and there are ways that we can go after people who are bad actors. But again, I would just say again, at this point, we really need to involve more people into this discussion. The people who testify before Congress are all the heads of companies that are basically operating in this area, and that's important, but we need other voices as well.
So more along that line, for the data privacy, there are about, 7 states that have passed data privacy. 3 may be the same, 2 may be the same, 1 thing. And that, look, in defense of the industry, they have come in and they have said, look, if the state, Massachusetts, does anything with data privacy, getting to what the Congress has and Mo just talked about, we need consistency, because you can't have 50 states with 50 different standards. So that's one of the issues that we're looking at with the data privacy law. And regarding the cybersecurity standards that we looked at, we actually sent it to the White House. They have a cybersecurity office that they reviewed the legislation to make sure it was consistent with the national standards that they were trying to set up, so that we wouldn't set up if we set standards up here, that they wouldn't be something egregious and way out of line that other states couldn't comply with.
Yeah, it's a couple of points that really went to those first 2 questions. You talked about the cat being out of the bag. It is just math. It's just math. You can't undo that. And so I guess my message to you might be not to do technological restrictions, because the technology's there.
Right.
The technology's not going to stop, right? You certainly need to make sure that the people who use it in the wrong way are punished appropriately, make the penalties severe enough. Somebody loses data, make it hard for those companies, that make it bad for them. But technological solutions probably are not going to, like encryption, right? It's just math, right? You can't put that back in the bag. The other point about how you detect what is AI generated. Unfortunately, you want to democratize AI. You want to make it available to everybody. But the problem is the only companies, the only places that can really actually do that job of determining what is not fake are these gigantic companies that have the data, right? So it's almost like you have to compel them to say, tell us that this is AI or not, because I don't think anybody else is going to have that ability.
No, I think you're right. But I also think we can, limit how the technology is being used. I mean, one of the believe it or not, there are discussions in the Pentagon about how you can take the man out of the loop, even in terms of a nuclear war, and pre-program everything so that, if this happens, then the bombs go off or whatever. I'm like, I don't want that. I want a man or woman in the loop when it comes to dropping bombs on anybody, right? And certainly when we talk about nuclear missiles and stuff like that, I mean, who knows, right? There's this kind of, on one hand, you're right, the technology exists, we can't put limits on it, but we can put limits on who uses it and how it's used. I think you would.
Yeah, I guess my question goes back on that European Union Act. One of the things I guess I had some concern about was the carve-outs they made based off certain industries. I think in terms of good, like they carved out research, medical, said we don't want to, restrict development on that. But my concern is, I think Morgan Stanley said that the pharmaceutical industry will spend $50 billion on AI in like the next 4 or 5 years. So how do we prevent, or, something they think is good, but still protect like the safety of people, where if we're developing pharmaceuticals based off AI models, and then we're doing testing through computer models instead of people, but how do you prevent those technologies for the good intended consequences that all of a sudden we have other issues that were unintended from that AI technology? So I guess how do you still ensure we have safety in things like pharmaceuticals without just completely turning things over to technology?
Yeah, so that's why we need everybody to be involved with this, right? I mean, because if not, I mean, I will tell you, just follow the money. The money going to Congress. And so if pharmaceutical industry wants a carve out for whatever reason, you'll watch a major uptick in donations to Congress people and senators from the pharmaceutical industry. So I think that there needs to be, we have to have watchdogs, and we have to make sure that there are no, that if there is a carve out, that we all understand, what it potentially can mean. And I worry about things, like, I still want a doctor to tell me what I should take. I don't want to rely on, a machine to say, get on this pill, get on that pill. I mean, and again, I worry about, because this is what's happening right now. So much of the bad stuff on social media right now, on all these platforms, people are making money off of it, lots and lots of money. This shouldn't be, Congress shouldn't be doing things, by doing, after only one hearing or 2 hearings with the heads of all the big companies.
I just, to go back to your, and you were talking with the cat's out of the bag. It's out of the bag. And I don't want to be naive or defeatist or whatever, but I don't want to be defeatist. I think we can't just give up. We have to look at ways to try to get it back in the bag, or at least some containment. And that's why I do think, when you talk about the technology, if you have a regulatory board with the appropriate government entities and the experts from the private sector, because it's got to be a team, you got to work together on this, you can get some limits on where can you go with that research? What can you do with this technology? So I think we can, if as long as we continue to fight and try to look at regaining what we've lost, I think we still can get some controls.
I should be telling you. Let's stay to everybody. Why don't you go? Yeah.
Yes, the cat is out of the bag. But couple things just resonated with me. You both kind of said some things, we want, the government, we want the big companies and all that. That's all well and good, but I'm looking at, 50 people in a room. We're all intelligent people, I hope, I think. I'll give us all credit for that.
That's the nicest thing anybody said to me all day.
I'll wait for it. Yes, the people with the money are the ones whose voices are gonna be heard the most. But there are also a bunch of people in a room, and that's part of what we're doing here. There needs to be consequences for criminal acts with AI. I have two cases in mind, one of which touched our family. We knew somebody, a member of our family, their high school was spoofed. Some boys got together, put some pictures of some of their classmates on unmentionable images. That's out there, and they promise, oh no, it didn't go anywhere. Baloney.
Yeah.
It did. The kid got a slap on the wrist and 2 days off from school. I want to know, how is that not child pornography?
Can I address that?
And, you know, similarly, I just heard a case in California where a group of middle school girls did the same thing. They've all been suspended, and that's going to follow them around, and I'm kind of glad for that. You know, so while it's great that industry and government is going to make all these decisions, you got to talk to the moms and dads. And yes, that's why we're here, but, you know, the injustice of some of this stuff strikes me as really wrong.
So just so you know, and this is, I would consider more of a state than federal type of thing. What I talked about, the revenge porn, which we're voting on next week. Whoever knowingly distributes visual material depicting another person, including visual material produced by digitization, either identifiable in the visual material or identified by the person distributing, identified by the distributing person, who is nude, partially nude, or engaged in sexual conduct when the distribution causes physical or economic injury or substantial emotional distress to the person depicted in the visual material, and does so with the intent to harm, harass, intimidate, threaten, coerce, cause substantial emotional distress, or with reckless disregard for the depicted person's lack of consent to the distribution of the visual material not produced by digitization in reasonable expectation that the visual material would remain private, going to you about the punishment, shall be guilty of criminal harassment and shall be punished by imprisonment in a house of correction for not more than 2.5 years and not more than a $10,000 fine, or both.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So, both of you have talked about, that was very good, talking about the fact that if you train models with biased data, then the model will make biased predictions, generate biased outcomes. And we've been thinking about it in the context of regulating big tech companies like OpenAI, Google, Facebook. But in the past 2 months, a couple of months, the Stanford released like the small large language model, small LLM, that people can actually train with their own data. And now, all of a sudden, like, anyone can take their own data that is potentially biased and train these models and use maybe to open a company. And how do you see this maybe being regulated? Because now, all of a sudden, everyone can do that.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer, but I mean, that is what we should be, you know, the Department of Commerce should be focused on that. In the House, the Committee on Energy and Commerce should be focused on that. I mean, these are the, you know, there's 1,000 issues here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm worried about I'm worried about what happens in this election.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, no, because, I mean, you saw, you know, that they were able to recreate Joe, I got a friend of mine, Lorenzo sent me it, because, but, you know, you could recreate Joe Biden, you know, saying, oh, by the way, and they did, the election is not today, it's next week, you know, and sounds like him, looks like him, and you don't know the difference. I mean, and so, I mean, you know, this stuff is being misused and manipulated now, and then you wonder, how, you know, how some are misusing it for profit, you know, targeting certain citizens. You know, a lot of senior citizens, you know, tend to be more believing of, you know, somebody on the telephone or getting something online, and they, you know, oh, please send me you know, you owe Social Security X amount of money, please send me your, you know, you owe me $50, and then they get all your Social Security number and everything else. I mean, this stuff is happening now, right? But, I mean, but everybody needs to be at the table. And you were right, parents need to be at the table. This is not a discussion just amongst high-tech companies. I mean, as I said in my opening remarks, parents need to be at the table. You know, kids need to be at the table. You know, we need to have a better understanding of where people are coming from. I mean, my daughter, you know, is a whole different communications and social media network than I do, right? And that's fine, and you know, but I'm still getting used to bifocals. So, you know, but I don't know as much about some of this stuff as she does, right? So it's valuable to get her input as well. You know, so, but there are ways to control this, and we have to, you know, we have to figure out what is the right way to do it. We also have to be mindful of freedom of expression issues. I mean, you know, there are things called courts, and you know, and depending on how far you go in certain areas, you know, this can be caught up in the courts for a very, very long time.
So along that, I was going to tell you is on the state end, having some sort of regulatory body, and I know, look, you watch the money, but we have to have some private sector involvement. So this is where them working with the government officials, trying to regulate something like that. And just also like yourselves, the parents, I can sit here and I can talk to you about what we're doing legislatively for AI and cybersecurity. But if I have a problem with my phone trying to access it, I would go to my kids, help me. Because if I've gone to a conference where we talked about trying to limit access for minors, and the industry comes back and says, that should be on the parents. It's like, how do you put that on the parents? Think about 90, I won't say 90, I'll say, people like myself, my kids know more than I do on how to access this information. So you can't throw that on the parents. And
So there are a lot of hands up, and so what I'm going to do is ask all the hands that are up to please state your question. We're going to get all the questions on the table, and then they're going to try to respond. Is that okay? So I'm going to start right there.
I just wanted to confirm something I think you said. Did you say that AI, it would be difficult to identify people of color with AI?
on facial recognition, the AI identifies a white person, the identification accuracy is very high. But a person of color, the accuracy is not as high.
So what can you explain that a little bit for me?
So basically, what it means is facial recognition. If Steve was in the place, facial recognition say that's Steve. If it went to you, it may, well, we don't know, that could be 5 different people. They wouldn't have the ability to do it. So that's why facial recognition, which we're trying to set limits for use by police, that it can only be used as a piece of evidence, that it's not, and it's not a sign of guilt.
So we are over, so I would like to get the questions on the table.
Yes, I was just wondering if there's any answer to, like, it sounds like there's a partisan piece to this where there is a split about what sides of the aisle are willing to do regulation and which aren't. I was wondering if there are particular issues on regulation, like either with revenge porn or with something with the private companies, some collaboration that you see as bridging the gap and being more bipartisan, that maybe is like a good starting point.
That's a great question.
I do have a question. Are you guys going to try to ensure that the government has enough resources to combat an AI-powered Bernie Madoff? I'm really worried about AI embedded in the financial markets, influencing politicians. When AI finally gets agency, we need to be prepared for that and have the resources to make sure that it really doesn't cause another 2008.
Yeah. One more question. Go ahead.
I think someone talked about, like, you know, the way I see it, like, there is a social issue and then there is a research issue. And then if we are tagging the data generated by AI, how do we decide which source is good or bad in those contexts, you know, from the research context or from social context?
One more question here.
So I feel like a lot of the legislation we're looking at right now is like putting out fires, right? So obviously we have to, you know, stop the revenge porn and the deepfakes and so on. But I also think that we're at the first generation of this problem. Meaning, right now, we're dealing with, okay, AI generates something, and what impact does that have to whatever the issue is? What's going to happen sooner than we know it is other AI models, humans are going to start picking up this content unknowingly, right? So the amplified bias from the AI model, if it inadvertently appears in a New York Times article or Boston Globe article, and that gets picked up by the next LLM, that leads to a runaway effect, right? Kind of like the feedback of a microphone. And that will accelerate really quickly. And I wonder if we're thinking of legislation in terms of how these models are actually developed and what controls are put in place before the models are deployed, right? So if you build a new drug, there's a lot of regulation around what do you need to do before you put that out in the market. There is nothing as far as putting a new AI model out there. And I say this as somebody who continues to work in this space for a long time. I think we're sort of going after the horse that has already fled the barn, but there are a lot of horses still left in the barn that we could probably lock the door for.
Okay, well, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so Mike talked about what's happening at the state level in terms of this commission that's going to be put together, and these discussions are already happening. Something similar is happening within the administration right now. I don't know all the details, but this is a massive subject. As we said in the beginning, the technology's out of the bag. The days of saying, let's not go down this road are gone. I mean, it is out of the bag. And by the way, we're talking about Massachusetts and the United States, but the world is a big place, right? And and we also need to be thinking about, can we come up with some common, agreements and norms that everybody, friend and foe alike, can, say we're dedicated to this. So that's one thing. The same thing, we have to have a strong watchdog, mechanism in place to be able to prevent kind of the Bernie Madoffs, or people ripping this off, or people scamming it and taking advantage of people. And I mean, that's what you're trying to do at the state level. We're trying to think of that at the federal level as well. And there needs to be government resources to do that. You can't, one of the things we're very good at is passing regulatory bills and saying this is what we're going to do, and then providing no resources for enforcement. None of this works unless there's resources for enforcement. And there is a partisan split. I mean, interestingly enough, there was less of a partisan split, although I voted no. I was in the way that amongst just a handful of people on the TikTok, there was kind of partisan agreement. I think the reason why, because it was about going after China. And everybody thinks that's a safe place to go. But I will tell you, and I try not to say this in a political way, but Congress right now is pretty dysfunctional. No. I was just at a retirement party, and the guy said, how are things going at the clown show in Washington? I said, don't refer to Congress as clowns. I said, that's an insult to working clowns. but the point of the matter is that, right now, Congress is not only bad at legislating, it's bad at not legislating. And so I would like to think like on revenge porn and stuff like that. I mean, there may be ways that we can kind of come together. But understand one thing, for some, artificial intelligence, some of these platforms that have raised all kinds of concerns, it's actually, some people benefit from this. They get followings, they get support, they whatever. So those are the people who say, I want no reg, let it go wild. Because I can survive politically when there are no controls. I don't want you worried about misinformation. I don't want you that you stay out of that. I can say that the world is flat and that's fine, right? And I think that is the issue. I would like to think, again, if we had political campaigns that were normal, this really should be talked about. You know, if we had a debate or whatever, I mean, this has huge implications. We're already seeing it. And we recognize, you heard about the good at the previous lecture. You know, there's bad, you know, we've all talked about the bad, and now the question is, what do you do about it? And there needs to be more focus by the White House on this stuff, more than there is right now, and Congress needs to take this seriously. I think the average age of a senator now is like 1,000. So for some people, this is all, it's another language, right? But yet it is really, really vital for our national security, for our personal security, you know, for how we're going to deal with how industries use it, how our military uses it. So there needs to be more attention given to this. And I hope more and more people are doing, and you need, if you've got ideas, let me know. I'll pass them on to the administration. Because, as I said, I mean, I think we have to understand is that we have to widen the group of people that are participating in providing information about how we move forward.
So luckily in the state end, what you were talking about, that's the purpose of the Cyber Control Board and the board and the AI Commission. It's to look where we are, put, I don't want to say limitations, but having the education, industry, government all assessing, putting some controls on where they can go in the future. So that's the intent of that. As far as the bipartisan nature, I can't tell you until next week on this deep fake in the Senate if it's going to be a Democrat-House split. I don't know in the House. I didn't really follow in the House what the vote was, so I can't tell you there. But I don't think, no disrespect.
Well, that's not partisan, that's difference of chambers, right?
We don't have the problems that they have in Washington. I mean, you look at some of the states that they have to deal with, some of the people that go there. So I don't mean that's respectful to any of your colleagues. But
she said I was intelligent.
So, Dan, what was the other question? And this bipartisan, the controls.
The research Bernie Madoff, partisan.
Oh, so just so support the governor's AI task force, part of the economic development bill, which is pending. She is trying to allocate $100 million to the recommendations that come out of the task force. So whatever recommendations come out, whether it's workforce, education, controls, they are recommending putting some money behind the commission, well, to support the recommendations. And the other thing too, when you talk about elections, we have all talked, I mean, so that myself and some of my colleagues have all talked, that we're just waiting. We expect that we're just waiting for the first false image or AI-generated ad in this election campaign. I think it's going to happen. The question is not, I guess the question is when.
Okay, well, we've kind of gone over our time a little bit, and I have to tell you that my biggest fear is that I won't pass that test when the computer asks me if I'm a human. I want to say that we're very fortunate here in Shrewsbury to have a state senator and a congressman who listens to the voices, because I do think that's really one of the most important things, and that's really the purpose of the library, is to bring the voices together so that we can begin to shape policy, because I think both of you are right. It's not easy. It's going to take some thoughtful consideration, and we want to really thank you both for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules, and really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. Thank all of you for coming. We'll look forward to it.
The next presentation, before Mr. Kowski, who will take an international perspective on security and AI.